Cage Minds, Micah Frankel, today bringing at you an interview that, man, I've been meaning to do this one for a long time. Joined right now by Meaghan Penning. How you doing, ma'am?
I'm good. How are you, Micah?
I'm doing well. Meaghan is an amateur mixed martial artist. She's active in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You may have seen her at some events as a ring girl. She's done that once or twice. Active in fitness, modeling, a whole bunch of other things, and we're going to hear her story today. So, where should we start off, Meaghan?
I guess, what if we start with this whole quarantine, since that's the big topic right now?
You said it right now. Everybody, COVID-19 is going on, and that obviously is consuming the forefront of most of the people's thoughts. How you been doing?
So at first, like I'm sure with everyone, it was pretty tough trying to figure out how to make my workout routine with gyms and MMA and training partners work more individually. And so it took me a good 2 to 3 weeks to get my schedule figured out, but I think I finally got it. I'm now going to sleep about 10, waking up about 6, get my first workout in. I do another around noon, and then usually try and get a night in as well. So I'm training maybe 3 hours now, mostly strength-based training and shadow boxing and cardio, because not having partners makes kind of difficult, but I'm lucky because my roommate's also very active in jiu-jitsu. She trains at 10th Planet Santa Fe, and so we've been able to drill and do some technique work and stuff in our apartment. We got some puzzle mats, so we'll throw that in there sometimes too. But yeah, it's kind of coming together now. It just took a while to figure out how to transition all the things that I finally got set up into an at-home base thing. So.
Now, if people know Meaghan, she's already very dedicated to her diet, very dedicated to all this. Some people went through some kind of, shock when everything first and didn't know how to react to the stay-at-home order. Did you have any of that? Did it take you a little bit to adjust?
I mean, it did in trying to figure out the routine and the schedule, but I think it's important, and I try to keep reminding myself, change is a part of life. This is, a bigger change than we're all used to, but, you always have setbacks and things that are going to disrupt your training or your schedule, and this is just another one of those things. So, I kind of went back to the mental state I was at when I broke my ankle a couple of years ago. And what was crazy about that is I spent maybe 6 to 10 weeks where I couldn't really do much of anything, and I figured out how to do all the same things. So, I switched all of my workouts to, ab routines. They had to change that cast, 3 or 4 times because I kept, sweating so much in it. Even though I wasn't using the leg, I was, sweating so much the cast kept, expanding. So I ended up changing it, 3 or 4 times. But I figured out how to roll with it, and that's whenever you get, a serious injury like that, when you're super active, it's always mentally a huge shock. And so this I'd kind of compare to that, because it's we don't have all the same resources, we don't have all the same things, but if you're just a little bit creative and you think about it and you keep a positive attitude, you can find ways around things. And that's kind of where I finally settled in the last 2 weeks, is figuring out a schedule that matches what I was doing before as best I can.
And what have you found to consume the extra at-home time, the extra boredom time? Because I know you're an active person, but part of that is going here or there, so I'm sure you found a lot more free time recently.
I don't know, honestly, Michael. I still feel there's not enough time in a day. I'm someone, I think, who, is always trying to, consume my time fully. So I literally somehow have managed to still completely fill up my schedule. Right now I have so many dishes to do. I have so much picking up to do, and this morning I already put chicken in the crock pot and started this whole slow cooking thing for that. My roommate and I decided we're going to do a photo shoot this weekend out in nature, so I'm wanting to cut down for that. I swear, it doesn't, there could literally be nothing open at all, literally stuck in my apartment, and I would probably find a way to schedule every last minute of my day. it's super ridiculous to me as like I think about it, because you're right, like you should have all this free time, and I still feel like I'm overscheduling myself. Like yesterday, I literally ended up taking the day to just sleep because I felt like I'd just been doing stuff for like 2 weeks straight and hadn't really had like a pause. Like I scheduled, once I got all those workouts scheduled in place, like that's really exhausting when you're not used to strength training, because I was never much of like a strength training based like athlete before this, and now like I've been doing that, so that like exhausts your muscles and shocks your, you know, mental capacity in a different way. So I think that probably also was like exhausting me and taking up some time. So yesterday I took like the whole day to just like relax. But that's like the first day I've had like that, I'd say, in 2 or 3 weeks.
Now, if you follow Meaghan along on social media, you've seen some of the routines, some of the exercises that she's been doing. You mentioned the strength training was new. What did you do to figure out what exercises you want to do? As I've seen, you're training yourself in a lot of these. How'd you figure out what exercises that you wanted to do?
So it started before quarantine. I'd been going to like Body Pump and boot camp at Defined Fitness, and then there's a few classes I tried at Sports and Wellness when I switched over there, like the Dungeon class they're doing. So there are a lot of like strength-based. So I'm familiar with strength training. I'm just used to doing it in a group setting and where you've got an instructor watching you, making sure your form is good. So I'm really glad that I was focusing on that right before quarantine, because it made me pretty confident about my forms. But like it's still like setting up a whole like routine and coming up with, oh, I'm going to do this, and this circuit with this way. It takes some time of just sitting down and like mapping it out. So I ended up getting the Sweat app for a month. They were doing a free 1-month trial, and that's with Kayla Sines and Chantel Duncan and all these other fitness models. And that app is really nice. It's like something like $20 a month maybe, and they give you a different workout every single day based on a different muscle group. Then there's recovery things in the app, yoga. So I liked that one. I tried that for a month, but I'm like, you know what, I'm going to keep trying different apps, and I don't know that I want to necessarily commit to one because this isn't lasting forever, and I still do prefer like the group fitness structure. So I switched to this girl named Natalie Mauve, and hers are a little bit more intense workouts, and those of I got a Fitbit also, because the Fitbit with the heart rate tells you your heart rate. So like while I'm working out, I can see like, am I hitting my target heart rates? Like, am I burning fat right now? Am I just kind of phoning this in? So I really like metric based things. Like I like to know, like, okay, when I do this many reps of this is getting my heart rate into the range I wanted it. While if I just do this, it feels really difficult, but my heart rate's not getting up there, and ultimately cardio is a big part of my strengths as a fighter, so that's something I work a lot on. So I like to make sure that my workouts incorporate a lot of high heart rate things. So with the Natalie Mauve one, I liked her app a little bit better. So yeah, I've been using all these different fitness trainer apps. I got some of those. I got resistance bands, and then I got those cables with the little handles. And those are like totally underrated, I feel like, because that's the thing. It's been really hard to find weights. Like, I don't know if anyone listening to this has tried going to like Walmart or like somewhere where typically you could go get like 20-pound weights. They are clean out of everything everywhere. Like, there was like this short period of time for like, I don't know, a day or two where my roommate Kendra, she said that her friend had found weights at the Walmart on Academy. And it was like this crazy thing. And so she's like driving out there like as soon as she hears, and like waiting in line at this Walmart for 20 minutes to get inside, and she was able to get like 2 20-pound weights. But that's been like it. So like the cables and all those resistance bands that are a little bit easier to buy and carry around and stuff have been really useful. And just learning how to use those, so that I've just been using those fitness apps, and they're usually entirely based around those bands because they're home-based workouts. So those have been really great for that. But yeah, again, just kind of being creative and finding things that work.
Doing all this, how much is there avoid missing the gym?
For sure, yeah. No, that's like, that's the hardest part for sure. I'm sure for like anyone else who's got a team and stuff, like can relate to that. Like it's the team, it's the routine, it's having coaches and people to motivate you and check you and make sure you're staying like on track. Like all of that is really like something that you kind of take for granted when you're trading, and it's like it's like all those days when you're like, oh, maybe I'll just come in for the first hour tonight, or, you know, maybe I won't come in today, but I'll make sure to make it on Saturday. You know, like all those times, like, man, like what a waste. I should have been there, you know, every single time that I had the opportunity to. But yeah, it's definitely like tough not having my fit team, my teammates, my coaches. I've been able to go. Sorry, I just like totally lost my train of thought. I've been able to go with my roommate Kendra to like be able to grapple with her a little bit. We've gone to like some parks and done some hiking together. So I've still got like that element of team because like luckily my roommate's really into fitness and like grappling too. But it's just still not the same, you know, having like a whole team of people and different bodies to work with and like coaches who are like on you and stuff. It's just, you can't like replace that, you know?
Right. Also, you're a big foodie. How much has that changed? Or how much, are you not able to make what you want now?
So, I mean, that's been fine. I have ButcherBox, which I love ButcherBox. Like, everyone should have ButcherBox, in my opinion. It's so nice. Like, so I haven't had to get, like, meats and stuff, at least, which is really nice. So pretty much, like, I just had to make sure I have vegetables. So at the start of quarantine, I kind of stocked up on frozen vegetables, like everybody, because you're like, what's going to happen? Like, who knows if things are going to be available? And then things were fine. And so, like, I got fresh vegetables, too. But I've been kind of mixing all that together. But at the start of quarantine, I was really focusing on taking my sommelier certified test, which is sommelier is like a wine aficionado or someone who like sells you wine or serves you wine. Pretty much you know a ton about wine, and you can work in a lot of different capacities. As a somm, you can be magazine article writer, you can sell on the floor like at a wine shop, you can be a server at a fine dine restaurant. So there's all sorts of different like fields you can go into with the sommelier certification. And so I was really working on my level 2. I took intro maybe 2 years ago when I broke my ankle. So I'm like, here's an opportunity where I can just like study a bunch and then take this test at the end of quarantine, because it was scheduled for May 18 or something like that in Santa Fe. But of course it got canceled, so that's a bummer. But I'm still putting all the study time in, and hopefully I'll be able to take it later this year in Phoenix or Denver. But at the start of quarantine, I was like really gung-ho about it, had all my wines before the liquor stores closed and everything, was tasting every day, was making meals every day that paired with the wines. And so that, like, if you saw my food page, like early quarantine, there was just like so many like beautiful meals and things that I put together and photographed and all this. And I gained a lot of weight doing that. So I've like massively cut back in the last like 3 or 4 weeks to get my weight back down. But it was like, I was kind of like, I knew that was going to happen, and I was kind of okay with it, because I'm like, I really want to get this time in to be creative, to like understand these food pairings with my wine. Like, when else am I going to get an opportunity to do this? I fully expected the quarantine to get extended through, honestly, I expect it to go through June, like mid-June, before we start seeing things go back to normal, being able to get back to the gym. Like, I hope it's sooner. I'm preparing to be like in shape again within the next 3 weeks, but like I expected it to go that long. So I'm like, you know what, it's better that I get this time to really like be creative about wine and food, and take this time to like do all that, which I can't normally eat indulgent food like this, make indulgent food like this. And so, it's like my roommate and I, we just experimented with all these different meal ideas, and took a bunch of pictures, and it was really fun while it lasted. But now I'm like, all right, enough's enough. Like, now we're both like on hardcore diets, like calories planned for every single meal. And so we're getting, but it was fun while it lasted, for sure.
And I believe also quarantine and everything, it threw off a fight that you were scheduled for, right? You were scheduled to be on the Southwest MMA series card. Yeah, that was supposed to be first week of, when was that even? Was that supposed to be, I've lost track of my days so much in this time. Was it April or May? Do you know, Michael? First week of April. I think we were looking at the first week of April. I don't have the poster in front of me.
So crazy. Yeah, so that was supposed to be a good month and a half ago. Now it's rescheduled for July 18 or 17. I think it's July 18 is the rescheduled date. So hopefully everything will be open and we'll be able to have an audience and things like that again. And if so, that's the date they've got it set for. I believe the same location. So that's really exciting that like people are like willing and gung-ho to like start planning things, start putting things together, like have things to be excited about. And if it doesn't end up like being allowed by then, like that stinks. But you know, at least they're being positive and trying to move forward with things. So that's exciting to me that the MMA community is like staying on it like that. So yeah, I mean, I'll be ready by then. I'll be ready anytime. Like, but I do believe that Tom said they reached out and we agreed to that date as long as everything works out accordingly. So fingers crossed there.
So we're about 10 weeks out, and with still being kind of in the stay-at-home order, do you feel positive that you'd be ready for, you know, a fight within that next 10 weeks?
For sure. Yeah, 10 weeks is, I mean, so I'm expecting my hope in my head, my expectations in my head, which I think I've given like extra leeway rather than like erring on the side of caution. I think that we'll be able to train in a limited capacity by the first week of June, like maybe like boxing and kickboxing classes will be allowed, just like spread out. But I would hope that by mid-June, late June, we would be able to train like any fight camp. So we'll see if that, you know, comes to fruition or not. But that would be my guess and my hope. I mean, did you see the UFC card last weekend? I thought it was pretty nice, pretty well done. I was crazy about Jacare having Corona, but other than that, like it looked like, you know, most of the fighters look pretty good, and like, because considering most of them haven't probably been able to do their camps, depending on if they're following the social distancing orders or not, and it still looked like some entertaining fights that were well thought out, good techniques, and it also was kind of cool being able to hear the coaching and everything like that more fully than you would normally with an audience. So it was a neat experience, and I think that like, in that regard, I would feel ready to step into the cage, even if I'm not able to do a normal camp, even if I'm not able to spar and train one-on-one with people as we have been. If I can stick with my techniques, if I can stay in shape and all of that, like that's really all I need to step into the cage with somebody. Like to me, fighting in the cage has always been like a test of your skills. Like to me, it's like taking a test like in college, right? You have all these things that you prepare, that you study, that you try to master, like theories and things like that. And then the cage work is just you testing what you've been able to put together and against someone who's also been preparing for the same test. So I think of it that way. So I mean, like, one, I would want to fight regardless of whether I have a full camp or not, because it's still a good gauge of seeing where you're at, what you need to work on, what you have worked on, what's improved, what's not. So that's what it is for me, especially at the amateur level. Like once you go pro, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more serious. It's you know, a way to make a living. It's not just like a test. But at the amateur level for me, it's like taking a test. So it's like, it just gives you an idea of where you're at and what else you have to do next.
Right now, I believe the record sits at 5-1 as an amateur. It may be off. I'm looking at Topology.
Yep, 5-1 if you count my China fight. 4-1 if you don't count my China fight. I'm pretty sure.
Right, I've seen it not counted in some places.
Say 5-1 even? Did you say Topology says 5-1?
Oh, I counted 5-1 because I know the China fight on Topology. It says 4-1.
Gotcha. Yep. So I think the China fight, because like they don't have the same commission as the U.S. and like they don't really like they have their own commission, and it's not as regulated as we are in the U.S. So I don't think that counts for my like official record, even though it was like a super cool experience. But yeah, so especially considering it was right before all this happened, it was probably like the last opportunity to fight there for a while. So, but yeah, I mean, 4-1 officially, 5-1. If you're counting just experience.
And when was that last fight?
That was October. That was the end of October. So I it was like the third week, I want to say. And so like, and it was crazy because like, obviously I'm thinking as all this is like transpiring, like I'm like, do I have antibodies already? Like when did we hear about Corona? And I'm like, that was maybe beginning of December when everyone was hearing about it in China. I mean, that means I was there like 5 to 6 weeks before everyone knew about it. So like, considering the Chinese government, like they have a handle on their secrets, you know, so like who knows like when it was actually going on. So I totally think, and I was sick for a long time when I came back, but it was just like a mild cold. So I don't know for sure that it was that, or if it's because I always get sick when I travel overseas. Like anytime I travel, I feel like I get like a mild cold after, just from your immune system being all thrown, from not sleeping for like 12 to 20 hours because it's a long flight. So like, I don't, like, if it was Corona, that would be pretty crazy. Like, all of my friends have all these conspiracy theories about it. They're like, we all have already had it because you probably had it because you came back from China and then we all got sick. Like, yeah, but I mean, none of us were really that sick, guys. Like, let's like, actually remember what happened. So I don't know, but that would be cool if I had antibodies from that trip.
Well, forget all that. I want you to get into the story of how wild it was fighting out there, because I heard that's a pretty crazy experience, and it's not every amateur that, you know, goes all the way to China for a fight.
For sure. No, it was really, really cool. So, let's see. So Terry, the owner of King of the Cage, he asked if myself and Andy Nguyen wanted to fight on that card, because I'm the strawweight amateur champ of King of the Cage. She's been fighting for King of the Cage forever, and she also has matchmaking expertise, so she was helping with putting the card together as well. So we both got asked if we wanted to go on that fight trip. Arlene and I had to get Chinese visas. So a lot of people don't know, but you actually have to have not just your passport, but you have to have a special visa that you get from the Chinese embassy. Our embassy of China is in LA. So you either have to have someone take it to the embassy for you, like someone who lives there in LA, or you have to go through a company to do it. You can't just mail it in yourself. So we ended up hiring a company to do it, and it was something like, I don't know, $700 for both of us to get these visas. And so that was like a whole process in itself. And I was like, man, this was like a crazy amount of work, but it was all worth it when they came back because they actually granted us 10-year visas. So Arlene and I both can go to China for the next 10 years. So if there's ever any fights again, then we'll be able to, like, we won't have to do all that again. So that was really cool because the promotion also paid for those visas and everything for us. So that was really cool. So when we went over there, we were staying maybe an hour from Beijing, and it was like this kind of mountainish area, and behind the hotel we were at, there was like this mountain, and there were steps built into the mountain. So it's super cool because for weight cutting, Arlene and I would run up to the top of this mountain, we'd run along the top of the mountain, and there would be these little like pagodas, like picturesque, like what are they? I can't think of what they're called, but you know, they've got like the Chinese like history and symbols drawn into the pagodas, and it's like all decorated that way.
Yeah.
So that was like really neat because it was right behind our hotel. So every day we got there maybe 2 or 3 days before weigh-ins. So like those 2 days we like went up that mountain maybe 2 or 3 times, and it was just so cool because you get to the top and you can just see everything. Like there's these ruins over the mountain. You can see like down into there. You can see the hotel on the other side. And so we went all the way over to the back side of it a few times. And there's pictures on my Instagram of that. It was pretty cool, pretty picturesque. So that's like, I couldn't go to the Great Wall, even though that was only an hour and a half from where we were staying. But this was like a good, like, it's a not like a super well-known site, but it's called the Ming Ruins, M-I-N-G, Ming Ruins. And so like that was still like a cool, like we got to see some like Chinese like architecture, history, at least like the style of it, even though we couldn't go to the actual Great Wall. Because that was something like being over there, it's not like in the States where you can go buy a big bus tour and it'll come pick you up and you can go see some sites. Like China is huge and like it was amazing that we were even as close as we were to the Great Wall because most areas you go to is not that close. Beijing's like an hour and a half further than where we were from the Great Wall. So like it's maybe 3 to 4 hours from Beijing. We just happen to be right in between the Great Wall of China and Beijing. But, like, you really can't just go and do stuff. And then after my fight, I ended up going into Beijing with Chaos Williams and his coach. Chaos just made his debut in the UFC beginning of 2020, I think, and like knocked a guy out in the first round. Super cool guy. He knocked out this Chinese kid on the card I was on in the first round. So we all went to go party in Beijing, and like we went to go to this thing after we were done going to the clubs. We went to go to this thing that's like designer type clothing, but like for super cheap. And normally they're open at like 5 in the morning or something like that, but I guess they'd recently changed their hours to like 9. So we take like a taxi out to this place. The taxi drops us off, doesn't wait or anything. We go and check, and it's locked. And it's freezing in Beijing at the time we were there. Like, I had my giant winter coat on, like, I had, like, bare legs, and it was freezing. And now we're stranded, and there's, like, you can't call people. Like, I don't have, you know, there's no, like, you can't just, so we're, like, going on, not Wi-Fi, but we've got service, because we bought the Verizon, you know, service package or whatever. So we're trying to download an app that will like be like Uber, but it's not Uber. It's like the China version of Uber. So we don't know how to work it, and we're like freezing to death, just like walking in the middle of nowhere because this whole area there's nothing open where we're at because it's like 4 in the morning, and we're just like stranded here. And you just really realize it's one of those like traveler moments where you realize how hard it is to travel somewhere where you don't speak the language, you don't have all the same resources. Like, you expect things to be as easy as they are in the States, and they're just not. You know, it's just a different culture that you have to learn, and like there's just so many differences. Like, being over there, it's like it really is a completely different country, a completely different place.
And was that, I believe that fight you fought in a ring, didn't you?
Yeah, so that one was a boxing ring. The actual fight itself was super cool. Sorry, I get caught up on the traveling and the culture. I know we're talking about fighting. But
no, that was a great story, too.
Cool. The girl I was fighting, first of all, like, because they don't have commissions over there, the weight classes were really interesting. So, and there's a whole issue with this leading up to it. So, initially they had me fighting this girl, and then they realized that the girl I was fighting is a lot smaller than me. She usually fights what our weight class would be 105. Over there, it's like, I think 104, a little bit less or something like that. And so, and she walks really small too. So she walks pretty close to her fight weight. So when they realized, like, I usually fight 115 and how big of a difference that is, they're like, oh, well, we'll just switch her opponent with Andy's opponent. So Andy's a pro fighter. She's had, you know, she's like, what, 7 and, I don't know, she's had at least 13 fights, I think, as a pro, and then plus her amateur fights. And so Andy's opponent was a little bit bigger. Andy and her girl were, like, exactly the same size. 110 is, like, a great weight class for both of them. And so, like, they were going to cut down to 105, I think, was the plan. So it was 52 kg, which is, like, or 52 kg was my weight class. Maybe it was 50 kg, but it was basically like 104, 105 pounds. So then they're like, so Andy's girl has had like 26 kickboxing fights, but only like 1 MMA fight or something like that. So then they tried to switch our opponents because they're like, okay, well, she's a little bit heavier, and this American girl's a little bit smaller. Like, Andy's a little smaller than me, so we'll put her with the other girl, and she can fight this girl because they're closer in size. So we look at that and we're like, no, like, Arlene was like, you cannot fight someone who got 26 kickboxing fights. Like, we're not doing that. It doesn't make sense for us to fly all the way over there for, like, something that's ridiculous. Like, that's way too much experience. It doesn't matter, you know, how good her experience was. So we were like, no, we can't do that. Like, we got to fight this first girl. So I get over there and I understand then why they wanted to switch it so bad. The girl I was fighting weighed in at like 108 pounds and like clearly walked around at that weight, and our weight class was 115. So she was like 108 pounds, like dripping wet. And I weigh in at like the allowance was like 160. I had to be under 116.8, which comes out to something in kgs. So I came in like 116.4 or something like that. But that was after like cutting like maybe 10 pounds. So the weight difference between us when we fought looked like crazy. But this girl teaches boxing at her gym, so she had definitely an experience edge on me in the stand-up, and she'd had, I think, 4 MMA fights. So we were pretty even in like our actual MMA cage experience. But yeah, like I thought for sure that fight would have gotten stopped sooner, because within the first 15 to 30 seconds of the fight, I had her on the ground, top of mount, like just wailing on her. And like Tom and I had worked a lot on my ground and pound leading up to this fight. So like by the end of the first round, like her face was like bruised up, like you could see it already. It was starting to swell. Her hair was all out. And like Arlene has me in the corner we're waiting for round 2, and she's like, get ready, they might stop this now. Like she's looking kind of like wobbly. But she got like her second wind, and she came out like still just going for it every single round. And pretty much every single round, the same thing happened. Within 15 to 20 seconds, I take the girl down. I'm beating on her until the end of the round. She like almost rocks me a few times, but can't quite get me off her. But she never, ever quit. Like her mental resolve, like I'd never fought somebody like that before. Like, and I, even like at a pro level, it's rare that I think you see this, where she was just like, would not accept defeat in any way. Like the entire time she's trying to get me off her. She's trying to, like, when we're still standing on our feet, she's trying to knock me out. Like, and she just like kept at it. So it was really cool to like face somebody like that. And I think it's definitely like a cultural thing to a degree. And like, I think that like collectivist cultures, especially being half Asian myself. So like, I know a lot of like first generation Asian, my mom's first generation. And there's like this like, I don't know if it's the poverty there or if it's a combination of that and like the collectivist mentality where like you don't lose. Like in Chinese culture, like it is shameful to lose. And so I'm not sure if that like plays into it, but yeah, psychologically this girl.
So looking back at that, out of the fights you've had, you'd call that one the toughest?
No, I wouldn't say the toughest, but mentally I would say she definitely like would not break, and I've never experienced that. But I wouldn't say it was toughest for me. Like I felt in control of that fight the whole time. I won 30-27. You know, it was an easier fight than I expected it to be for sure. Like I prepared for not knowing what I was going to face, and this girl's boxing was pretty sharp. But at the end of the day, like it was easy for me to get the shot, get it to the ground, and finish it. Definitely the hardest fight would be against Hannah, which is my one loss. And that was mainly because I don't think I've ever been hit like that before. And it's crazy because, like, in my Michigan fight, my face was so busted up, so swollen, so bruised after that girl because she was so much bigger than me, and she just, like, she landed some blows, and, like, I felt like I was even going to go out in that fight in Michigan, where I ended up getting a rear naked choke in the first round when I finally got to the ground. But with Hannah, she hit me once, like, at the start of the first round, like, right square in, like, the nose, upper lip area, and, like, my nose started bleeding, and I just, like, honestly, I don't think I've ever even had a nosebleed since I was a child. Like, I've gone over this a million times, like, in my head, like, why did it, like, freak me out so bad? And I really think, like, that shock of, like, bleeding, and then, like, being choked as you're bleeding, and then that makes you bleed more. It's just, like, because what's crazy is, like, I watched the video, and I was getting out, like, she had me in a triangle, she had me in an armbar, she had me in a triangle, she had me in an armbar, and I was getting out every single time, but then it was like I was dazed. Like, I didn't move, I didn't scramble, because I was just, like, freaking out, basically. And so it's like a good experience to have, though, because I don't think I will ever feel that again, because now that it's happened once, it can't really surprise you again. And so I've had my nose busted since then again, because it breaks easier once you've had it broken once. And it doesn't really give me that same shock that it did that moment. And plus, you know, you're in an arena, you've got people, you know, you've got nerves, all of that too. But I think that it really was that like popped the cherry, like first time experiencing a broken nose experience.
Was that different? Because so far you had submissions, you had finishes. How shocking was it to you, that fight?
So China, you mean?
No, I'm talking about the Hannah Scoggins fight.
So with that one, so pretty much like in the moment during that fight, I heard JJ in my corner say, like, you've got 15 seconds left. And my arm, like a lot of people, like after it, they thought I broke my arm. Like it looked really overextended. And it was. Like it was definitely like, felt pretty crazy. I heard the pop, you know. But I was like, in my head, I'm like, all right, do I tap or do I let it break, or not even necessarily break, but maybe just some tendon damage or whatever, and go to the next round with a hurt arm, you know? And it really, like, in the moment, I was definitely thinking, like, I can last this out. And I've seen fighters do that before, like Paige Van Zandt. She broke her arm in the first round, came back, ended up winning the fight, you know? And so I really, like, had to make that decision in that moment. And because it was an amateur fight, I was like, you know what? It's not worth it. It's an amateur fight. There will be other opportunities. This isn't like a life or death situation. It's not worth breaking my arm over and then having to have all of that recovery time and not know, like, if it's ever going to be 100% again. So, like, so in that moment, like, I decided, okay, like, I need to tap, even though, like, pain-wise, like, I could outlast it, and I felt like I could have gone the second round and kept going, which is a good thing to, like, know about yourself. But, like, in that moment, I was like, it's not worth, like, the amount of recovery time, especially after having that broken ankle. I really do fear that injury element. Like, it does suck to be injured, and it sucks to have to be out, and it sucks to not know if it's going to heal back the same way it was, or if you're always going to deal with that for the rest of your life. Because with my ankle, they were telling me all sorts of crazy statistics, like, oh, you know, you got a 40% shot at recovery. Then if we do surgery, there's another 40% chance that will recover it. But there's a chance that you might just not be able to walk on it ever again. Like, this is a rare type of break. You know, those kinds of things, like, it really does make you realize, like, is it worth it? You know, and I think that if I were in the UFC, if there's win bonuses, if there's all this, you know, money involved, everything else, like, might be worth it. And not to mention they have the people on hand to, like, fix you up after. But for something like this, you know, it's an amateur show, it's an amateur bout, it's only my 5th fight. So and I'm glad, like, in hindsight, I'm glad I made that decision because, like, you can see in the video, like, it's pretty close to, like, snapping, and it probably would have caused me a lot of problems in the future. And Hannah's a really talented opponent. Like, I'm not in any way disappointed, I guess, with that loss. Like, it was still worth the experience for sure. And I gained a ton in that fight camp. My wrestling leveled up. Like, a lot of things were gained by taking that fight. So I'm definitely always going to be glad I took it. But if she ever comes up to 115, like, for real, like, when she goes pro and I go pro, or I ever go down to 105, I would definitely want to rematch her.
We're not even 3 years into your amateur run yet. You've had some big opportunities. That KOTC title that you've won, going over to China. We've seen LFA be interested in trying to get you booked for some fights. Have you been surprised at just the size of opportunities that have come your way?
Honestly, no. So the thing with women's MMA, and part of why I decided this is a good move for me to get into, is back when I first started MMA, living in Michigan, living in Flint, I've been training jiu-jitsu maybe for 2 years, but very dedicated. I loved it. I love jiu-jitsu already. And I did not necessarily like the striking side of the game from what I'd seen of it so far, but I was like, I really want to test myself and see, like, how my self-defense works, like, in a setting with someone who's also trained. So that was initially, like, my first fight, why I took it. But then I broke my ankle, couldn't do that first fight. When I broke my ankle, I really had to take this time to, like, analyze what I want, like, in my future, like, what I want to do as a career. Did I want to go into sommelier, like, more seriously? Did I want to get more serious about fighting? And I realized, like, in that time off, which was, like, driving me nuts, even with the modifications I was able to make, I realized, like, I really do want to go full speed with this and try and give this, like, a real shot. I'm young still, healthy, like, I can really make a run at this. And at the time when I was looking at all this, it was when Nico Montano was on The Ultimate Fighter. And so, like, you're seeing the 125-pound women's weight division just coming to be in the UFC. You've already got the 115, the 135, the 145. I'm looking at it like there's a chance they might add a 105-pound division. Like, women's MMA is just growing. Like, and now I'd say it's, like, not growing at the rate it was when I first got into it, but it's still, like, something where you have a higher demand than you have participants to fill that demand. So to me, like, as a business major, I'm looking at it, or I looked at it as, like, there's room in this sport for me to very quickly advance and improve if I can just get the right training and the right skill set. There's a lot of opportunity, especially with my marketing background. I have a degree in business management from Northwood University, a bachelor's degree with a minor in marketing advertising. So, like, I kind of already knew, like, how I want to create, like, my fighter persona, like, who I am in my images, who I am in, like, what I present, like, what I do in my fights, like, what I wear, you know, all this, like, stuff that goes into, like, marketing and advertising and creating a product, basically. I'm like, I think that I've got good ideas for that type of work, and it's fun because it's, like, I get to do what I love all day long, which is, like, training and fighting and being active. So when I first looked at it, part of why I picked fighting was because I saw a lot of opportunity in the sport to very quickly get where I want to be, which is very different from, I used to be in singing and acting when I was growing up, like maybe middle school, high school time frame. And I was, like, working on an album in Nashville with, like, different producers. And I have like a whole album that's got, like, 10 songs on it that's just, like, sitting somewhere, because, like, I got deep into that world and realized, like, wow, you have to hear no so many times. Like, everyone wants to tell you no in this industry for, like, a really long time. Like, it really takes, like, a lot of disappointment, because it's the opposite. You have far more participants than you have demand. It's just everyone wants to be an actor and a singer. So like, transitioning from that and knowing, like, how cutthroat and how competitive it is to something like this, where if you just put in the time, the effort, the work, this is a growing industry, and there's a lot of, like, room for women in the sport right now. And it's just continuing to grow as a sport and really find itself. Like, MMA is still so new. Like, for men also, you know, it's really only been around since the 90s, 2000s. So it's, like, it's still growing. It's not an Olympic sport yet. There's still, like, so much to see as far as, like, how it grows. And that's why I find, like, what Dana White's doing with the UFCs this week, where he's, like, the only sport that's doing sports right now, which I think is a great opportunity for, like, new fans of MMA to come on board, because there's nothing else to watch. There's nothing else to do right now. So, like, things like that, like business philosophies and taking risks like that, are always really interesting to me to see. But no, like, in answer to your question, I wasn't really surprised with the opportunities, because that's why I got into this sport, is I knew that it's like, within, I don't know, maybe 2 years of starting MMA, I got to meet Rose Namajunas, the strawweight champion of my division, and, like, things like that. Just having so much access to people, because it's such a small community. Like, I really do love that, and I think it's, like, a really neat aspect about the field.
Now, you mentioned it already. You're from Michigan. When and where did the martial arts journey start?
So I took my first jiu-jitsu class in community college, and I took a semester of jiu-jitsu as, like, my, college elective course, and, like, I hated it. I had no idea what was going on. Like, I was expecting it, I think, to be, like, taekwondo or, like, some kind of, like, striking type of art, and I'm like, what are we doing on the ground with sweaty people? Like I had no idea what was going on. I was so lost. So it was really funny. Like, maybe that was when I was maybe 17, 18. I started college kind of younger. And so then maybe I was newly turned 20. No, I wasn't even 21 yet. I was 20 when my brother said he wanted to take a Muay Thai class. And I'm like, oh, that sounds fun. Like, I've never done that before. I kind of gained a lot of weight since I'd finished college. I was like maybe 142. So I think it'll be a good opportunity for me to like get down in weight and start like becoming active again. So my brother and I go up to this school called Cousins MMA, which was like a smaller martial arts academy in Bay City, Michigan. And the owner, Charlie Cousins, he used to be an MMA fighter. He was like a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. So my brother and I took classes there maybe for about 6 months. And then my brother ended up breaking his leg, and he never ended up coming back to it. But I ended up switching gyms when that happened to a gym in Flint, Michigan, and I trained under Andre Garcia for maybe 2.5, 3 years, and it was a very like he was under at the time Walter Cascal out of Vegas, who's a third-degree black belt, I think, from Brazil. And I've met Cascal a few times. He is the one who signed my papers for going to Worlds Jiu-Jitsu. I still have, like, an association with them. And another coach who I trained with in Michigan, Victor Torres, who also is under Cascal for his jiu-jitsu, both black belts. So I started with, like, a very serious jiu-jitsu lineage, learned some striking, but then ultimately made the move to Albuquerque because Fit's just one of the most, it's just one of the best places for striking arts, in my opinion, especially after watching Nico on The Ultimate Fighter and just her style of how she puts everything together. That was kind of my motivation to check out Fit. I tried Rose Namajunas' gym, also 313 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Denver, and I really liked them also, but Denver just seemed like a really big move. I'd never lived so far from home before, and I'm like, Denver's really expensive. I don't know. I might get distracted here too. It's like a very like big city. So I'm like, I think that Albuquerque is a better location for me, and I really liked Fit when I got to know Tom and Arlene, and so I was like, so I tried it for maybe a month and a half and realized like this is definitely the place for me to grow as an athlete, to grow as a fighter, and to grow as a person. So I've stayed here since.
And tell us about how that's been, how the transition to Albuquerque and your progression there at Fit NHB.
It's been just like really awesome. Like I feel like I've grown so much with my athleticism especially, but putting all of the tools together with fighting. Like I just did a boxing match before quarantine happened, and that was like a huge leap for me because like I never considered myself a striker. Like grappling's always been my thing. So to like put in the time and really get confident enough to do something like that. And then that experience was just crazy. Like I just felt like my cardio and like my wind, it was just like, I normally consider cardio my greatest strength. And I just felt so winded like the whole time, and they're only 2-minute rounds, like 3 rounds. So like just going from coming in here having no striking pretty much to doing that within like, you know, a year and a half, like that's pretty cool, pretty amazing. A good testament to Arlene and her boxing classes. We do maybe 4 times a week morning boxing classes, and then every now and then she'll have the at night class for the MMA fighters. And then I've been working a lot with Tom one-on-one on my ground and pound, and that's like, I just feel like a completely different person on the ground having that perspective. Like I'd always been really strong with my jiu-jitsu, but now it's like my passing game is just like a whole other level. Being able to strike on the ground like effectively, and like it's just like a completely different game. My wrestling, like now I actually like it's crazy when you do wrestling under someone who's like a jiu-jitsu focus, because you learn all the basics. You know, you know what a double leg is, you know what a single leg is, but it's just completely different when you train wrestling under someone who's like primarily a wrestler and who's a good wrestler. You know, JJ is like, he was an Olympic alternate in, I don't know, 1998 or something like that. Like truly like a wrestling background style. And it's just so, you just see improvement so much quicker. Like now I can chain things together. Like I know what an opponent does when I pull their head this way, and like what I can follow up that with. And, you know, and just my athleticism in general, I think has really improved by training more wrestling and things like that. I never considered myself like an athletic person before I got into MMA. Like I played tennis as a kid, but that was it, like tennis, and I did cross country. And so like all those things like that you see, like people who have been athletic their whole life, like my best friend Hanite in Michigan, she's like super athletic. She played basketball. She was captain of the volleyball team. Like she did all these different athletic things. So when she got into MMA, it was so much easier for her, like because she already knows like how the body works and like how hips move when you do this with your arms, or like, you know, full body like movements. And I didn't really have that background. So like training wrestling as much as we do at Fit, I think has really built that, as well as like started to make me see like how you train, and it's like giving the building blocks for that. But I think that athleticism was huge for that. So yeah, that's kind of been the past year and a half.
Has there been a point where you said to yourself that you're almost surprised that you've went down this path?
No, I'm really, it's very surprising to a lot of people who knew me growing up, my family and everything else, because there's no fighters in our family. Like, my dad tried boxing when he went to West Point Military Academy, and wrestling because you're required to, and he hated both of them. Like, he was like, that's the most exhausting thing ever. Like, I'm never doing that again. You know, like, no one in my family ever had that passion for it. But it's funny because, like, when I think about it, when I was like a kid, I used to, you know, all those different Marvel movies would come out, or like movies where you got these spy kids and things like that. And I would always be super, super drawn to those kinds of movies. And like after you leave the movie theater, like me and my brother would be like running around pretending we're like super spies and all this. And like that's kind of like how it feels now. Like when I watch those movies, I still feel that same like excitement. And I'm like, maybe this was like it calling me all this time, and I just didn't recognize it because I didn't have any role models who did any of that. So like part of my platform as a fighter and what I really try to promote is like giving kids the opportunity to try things like that, to try my martial arts, to try self-defense classes, like not just because it's good to have a basic, you know, some basics and things like that in case something ever does happen, you know, but also because you never know what your kids' passions will be, and they could do something completely different from what you promote or what you're really into. Because there's lots of things that I love that my parents do. Like I was always into tennis as a kid, and all sorts of things that my parents do that I really liked too. But that's something that it never would have occurred to them to be like, oh, let's go put her in an MMA class. Like that would have just been like such a foreign concept to them. Like, so it's to me, it's like something I really try to platform and promote, is like the idea of letting your children try like anything and everything just to see, because you don't really know what a child's interests will be or what's going to draw them to different things. So
a lot going on. Is there any fighters that you've really attached to that you watch what they do and how they handle all of this stardom from everything? Is there anybody that you've almost said has been a role model in the fight game for you?
For sure. Like I love watching. I've got the UFC Fight Pass, and during this quarantine, I've been like definitely watching a lot of fight videos because like you might as well while we've got this time. I really love watching Rose. She's one of my favorites. Her striking is, I think, really similar to the way Arlene teaches, that kind of unorthodox, loose, like striking style, a lot of head movement and stuff. So I try to watch her a lot. I've been watching a lot of Joanna lately just because she's got that textbook Muay Thai. I love Jang. I'm so excited that she's the new champ. I'm really excited to see her next, you know, upcoming bouts and who they get to fight her, because I think she's a killer for sure. Jessica Andrade is one of my favorites, and she's been in the UFC for so long, fought at, you know, 135 and 115 at only 5'1". So like she's always really interesting to watch to me. So yeah, I'd say, but honestly, like all of the women of MMA, like all of the UFC women, like I shouldn't say all of them, but quite a few of them in the roster, like I love looking up and researching. And anytime I hear about a new fighter that I can't think of their past fights or remember their past fights, I'll immediately look them up and watch a few of their fights and see their style and kind of analyze things from that perspective. I don't watch as many male fights, but there are definitely a few. Like anytime there's an upcoming bout, like when Ferguson was going to fight Gaethje, I went back and rewatched a lot of both of their fights. That was really cool. I always like to see like evolution, and so like with that Gaethje Ferguson fight, for example, like how much Gaethje has evolved under Trevor Whitman, like how much smarter of a fighter he's become. You know, he's always had that power, but like now he's got that like maturity. And so like it was cool to watch like some of his past bouts to now. So I like to do a lot of that like comparison and understanding like how fighters are built, because obviously I'm trying to build myself in that same way. So
On the Gaethje note, I've never seen such a crazy jump in defensive ability in 6 months time. Went from a brawler to looking like Canelo out there just making Ferguson miss. That was ridiculous improvement.
For sure. Yeah, that was crazy, wasn't it?
I was just blown away. I thought it was a toss-up fight. I no way thought one of them would dominate like he did. I was utterly amazed.
So, I'm not going to lie. I totally called that one. I'm wrong about a lot of fights, all the time. But that one, I definitely said, I think Gaethje is going to take this because he called out Ferguson. And Gaethje and his team are such good analysts. They really do know where they're at. They know where they stand in the fight game. Rose, the same way. She also trains under Trevor Whitman. I think they're very good at analyzing what they need to improve and how to do that and, what they're capable of. So I'm if he called him out, I trust him. I trust his judgment, and I trust his team's judgment. And I know they wouldn't have called him out without having his team behind him and agreeing with that. So, I think he's going to take it because, I really think they're the best at analyzing where they're at.
It's a great use of a high level of intelligence, just like I feel like you make use of it. And I feel like you have a bigger picture that you're working towards, or that's the end goal. You want to share a little bit of that with us, what your bigger picture is?
For sure, yeah. So, everyone's goal is obviously to be the champion. Someone just said that in an interview, and I think it it might have been Tisha Torres, actually. But someone said something, some female fighter said something effective, I don't think anyone gets into this sport without having dreams of, being a champion someday. That's obviously everyone's goal. So, when I look, but for me, when I look at my fighting on an everyday basis, obviously when I got into this, when I first said, I'm going to get into women's MMA, of course that's the goal, is, I'm going to make it to the top. But when I look at this every single day, I'm focusing on what am I going to do today to get better tomorrow, to get better for my next fight. Anytime I have a fight that's, set up, planned, I make, a game plan. And I put together, what elements in this fight camp of my fight game am I going to work on? What am I going to improve by the time this fight happens? What is going to be there in the cage? What is my goal? What? So I try and focus on it day by day, fight by fight. And I don't think, at that point, because honestly, in this game, you really don't know. You don't know injury-wise. You don't know. With Corona, with what's been going on with this, it really makes you wonder, what's even going to exist, in our industry? What is MMA even going to look like in a year? So initially I was looking at planning on going pro sometime this year. Now it might get pushed because I want to make sure I'm going pro at a time when it's most advantageous for me, from a marketing perspective, from a fight perspective, from who's in the game and who's are there good fights out there for me to keep improving, to get to the UFC in the shortest time possible. But that's the ultimate goal, like any fighter, is to make it to the UFC, to get a good contract with them. Then you've got all of your endorsements and working on how you're going to make money at this sport and how you're going to make it a long career for yourself. So right now, all I'm thinking is one day at a time, one fight at a time. But obviously, as things start to settle with everything that's happened and we see where the industry's at, I'm going to look at going pro probably early next year would be my hope. So, but I'm in no rush.
A lot of things going on. That was a great conversation. I really got to thank you for the time today, Meaghan. I've taken up an hour of your time. Got to hear a lot of great stories.
Thank you, Mike. It was super fun. I really appreciate you reaching out.
It was great getting to talk to Meaghan today. If you guys want to keep up and follow her on social media, she is at Meaghan Penning everywhere. MEaghanPenning. Cage Minds. If you're not already following us, guys, it's Cage Minds Combat Sports News on Facebook, at Cage Minds MMA on Twitter. Instagram is at CageMinds_com. Apologies that it's all over the place. And Cage Minds MMA show on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys for listening.